Hi, welcome to the agenda. This week, we're talking to a candidate, Miss Julianne Murray. She's running for Attorney General of the state of Delaware. Miss Murray, welcome to the agenda.
Thanks for having me.
We want to make it clear that you're starting early, you're getting the word out there, but we would like to thank you for choosing the agenda and our audience for giving us an opportunity to listen and to know a little bit more about you. So where is it that you hail from?
I am not a native Delawarean.
Okay.
I have to start with that. I've been schooled. I've lived here for about 20 years, but I actually was born in Alexandria, Virginia.
Okay.
I am 51, going on 52, and married and a dog mom. No children, but have been in Delaware. I went to high school and college in Arizona. Actually, my parents, I'm from a divorced family, lived with my father, went to school in Arizona on an academic scholarship. I was very fortunate. Moved back to the East Coast and was actually a paralegal and worked in the legal field, but was not an attorney. And when we moved to Delaware in 2003, I was a law firm administrator for a law firm in Sussex County, and in 2008, at the ripe age of 38, decided, I think I'm going to become an attorney, and continued to work and went to school at Widener up here in Wilmington, graduated in 2011, passed the bar on the first time, which is something at 41, and actually opened my own law firm from the beginning. So I was actually a solo practitioner in 2012 at a firm called Murray Law.
Okay. So you've taken, I guess, steps, prepare yourself for this endeavor of becoming the next Attorney General. But before that, you took a stab at becoming governor.
I did.
Tell us a little bit about that.
Okay, and it's interesting because it is the lawsuit that turned into the candidacy. Okay, and unexpected for everybody. I have a firm in Sussex, so it's Murray, Phillips, and Gay now is the firm. I've taken on 2 partners. And from a practice area, I've always been interested and argued constitutional cases, but my actual normal practice is estate planning, so like wills, powers of attorney, healthcare directives, and real estate settlements. But and then I've done criminal defense, but we'll come back to that. But in May of 2020, COVID had hit, and in March, and lots of states of emergency, lots going on all over the country. Here in Delaware, the governor actually had a short-term rental ban in place. And Sussex particularly was very impacted by this.
So these are your VRBOs, your...
Correct.
What's another agency?
Airbnb.
Airbnb.
Took me a second.
Like that, right?
Yeah. So, but basically what a lot of people didn't realize was that short-term rental ban was all short-term rentals. So, I mean, hotels were not even able to make reservations and take reservations in Delaware. So you have hotels, you have private homeowners who want to rent out their house, rent out their condo, things like that. And for people who do that, the summer, you can, the rent that you collect over the summer pays for the whole year if you have a mortgage, okay? So we're heading into Memorial Day, basically, in May of 2020. My husband and I actually have a condo in Dewey Beach that we couldn't rent. And basically, I really disagreed with the restriction of the short-term rental ban. I thought that there were precautions that could have been taken. I mean, and you have to go back in time with what we knew at the time.
So this was early on in 2020.
Correct.
When
early
the pandemic, early in COVID.
Yes.
And there wasn't as much, we don't know everything about COVID now, but there wasn't as much knowledge in regards to spread.
Correct.
So an attempt for the governor to protect Delawareans was to put a short-term ban on, I guess, short-term rentals.
Correct.
Right? So this wasn't forever. This was just until, I guess, that administration understood what was going on.
All true.
Right.
From the lawyers' perspective, the issue with it was a blanket ban, and there was no end in sight. We were already at this point into 2 or 3 months of a state of emergency. And basically, I filed a federal lawsuit about constitutional property rights. That, that by doing a ban and a blanket ban, that is too much. That, when you are talking about a constitutional right, whether it's a property right or anything like that, you have to use what's called the least restrictive means, okay? A blanket ban is not the least restrictive means, was basically the argument. I did not realize at the time that I filed it how popular it would be. And what I mean by that is I filed the lawsuit on a Friday afternoon, and the AP calls me within 1 hour of when I filed it and said, who's the Murray? Because it was Murray versus Carney, because my husband was the plaintiff. And basically, why didn't you name yourself? Well, because a lawyer who represents themselves has a fool for a client. Right. I don't want to represent myself. I need to be the lawyer in this case. But the number of people that reached out from Delaware and all over the Eastern Seaboard who wanted to be coming into Delaware reached out to me and said, thank you for filing it. This is, enough is enough, was really, and this was only 2 or 3 months into this. Ultimately, what happened was, and one of the other things that was key about filing that suit was Maryland was open. Okay, so here we are in Sussex County, and Maryland is taking rentals. So from an economic standpoint for Sussex, and really for Delaware, I mean, because a lot of people up here in Wilmington also have second homes, right, down in Sussex County, everybody was going to Ocean City and crossing into Maryland. So we're watching a huge part of our economy kind of pour out of the state of Delaware into the state of Maryland. Ultimately, after I filed it, within about 10 days of when I filed it, the short-term rental ban was lifted. Reality, maybe that was going to happen anyway. Ironically, what happened is people went, oh, she filed a lawsuit, and look what happened. And at the time, there was not much conversation about who was going to run for governor so this is May before a November election. We knew that Governor Carney was going to run again, but there was nobody that was going to primary him that we were aware of, and there was nobody on what I would call the Republican side that was going to run against him. And that seemed
an opportune time.
An opportune time. That's an exact. Thank you for that's perfect. And so I basically, this was middle of May, 1st of June, said, you know what? I have never run for office before.
But there has to be something more to that. I have never run for office before, but I have no intention to run for governor. And I think that I have some pretty good ideas. So what is it that makes you say, I want to run for governor? Was it the popularity and the opportunity that came about from the bill that you had removed, or the law that you had changed, or the timing of your submittal for your complaint before the law was changed, and the popularity that caused? Was it that made you say, you know what, why not run for governor and really make some change?
It's a good question. It had nothing to do with the popularity.
Nothing at all? Nothing
to do with the popularity. It had to do with, I'm a regular person, and but I'm intelligent, not being an egomaniac here,
not
but I can think.
You passed the bar on the first try?
I did, but I think that it was that I really thought that we needed a we the people candidate here in this state. We needed somebody that was not coming from a politics background. And I would say this about anybody who has been in politics for 10, 20, 30 years.
Were you in politics prior to this?
No.
Did you have any political aspirations prior to this?
None.
Wow.
And basically, where I was coming from was, and I will tell you, nationally, this was also kind of happening, where there were people who had never run for office before, or, were all of a sudden kind of jumping in and saying, enough with career politicians. Delaware actually has a history of kind of a revolving door. You do time in an office, and then you move to the next office, and you move to the next office. And I think that at the end of the day actually hurts regular Delawareans.
If you're ineffective, right? So
correct.
Let's be honest, a lot of states have the similar things. And I wouldn't even call it what we have as nepotism, because it's Really not, but it's more or less being recognized, right? And it allows you, because of our populace is less than 1 million, it makes it
just under
a million, but we're getting there. We're getting there. People are having babies every day. But we are different, right? So qualifying us, comparing us to other states, that's not all in all accurate, right? So we can walk that one back.
Okay.
And then we can say, well, were those people effective in those roles that they had? Because not all legislators are effective, right? Despite how they move forward, they're not necessarily effective. So what is it that's going to make you an effective, not only candidate for an attorney general, but from a hypothesis standpoint, what would make you an effective attorney general?
Okay, and then, but I do want to, I have to finish the governor thing,
please do.
just in terms of kind of quantifying what happened. No, it's, hey, you're the interviewer. I'm the interviewee. It's all good. But I think that, so ultimately I got into that race. 6 people, got into that race.
Right.
And I won the 6-way primary in September, and I debated Governor Carney 5 or 6 times between the middle of September and November 3rd. I lost by 50,000 votes. Okay? It's a 100,000 swing, but if 50,000 fewer had voted for Carney and voted for Murray, you would be looking at Governor Murray.
Right.
Yeah. Very interesting time, to 190-some thousand votes that for somebody who had never run for office before. And the reason that resonated, the reason that happened was I worked my buns off, and I got all over this state and made people kind of go, wait a minute, maybe we do need something different. Maybe we need somebody who's not coming from a long history of politics, who can come in with fresh ideas and, and kind of see what happens. Okay? So that was actually kind of the genesis of, of this AG run. There were, and so
Gotcha.
I think that, when people wait in line for 1, 2, and 3 hours to vote for me, I mean, the number of people, and reached out to me and said, I believe that you will help Delaware. I think that your mind and your heart is in the right place. You're not interested in, taking care of your friends or any of the stuff that comes with, someone who, comes through years and years of politics. That changes a person.
It does.
And it's, for me, I thought that it was going to be a one and done, as they say I would run. It was a unique period in time because of what was happening with COVID. I mean, Governor Carney and I totally disagreed on the policies of COVID. I mean, so the debates were really kind of interesting in terms of, we could talk about the economics, we could talk about education, the things that I philosophically thought were.
And someone published that you believe that it was almost a hysteria or propaganda.
True.
Okay.
True. I did think that.
Right. And are those still your thoughts?
Yes. I mean, I do. I think that we needed facts, and we needed to be fact-based on how we were treating it. Granted, it was early, so we know a lot more now about COVID than we did 2 years ago.
Absolutely.
But I think that, and I will tell you, as a person, when the information came out March, April of 2020, everybody was scared. I mean, they were telling us millions and millions of people were going to die, how transmissible it was. There was a lot in there, and that kind of fed a fear that I think, at the end of the day, in terms of kind of numbers of population, like how many people actually died because of it. It's not that I don't care, I absolutely care, but you do have to balance, living our lives, earning our livings, and things like that. And so we just philosophically disagreed. But to kind of, to move to the AG, when I was running for governor, there was, this was right during the time of the George Floyd. I can't even think of what to call it.
A social awakening.
A social awakening, fair. That's a fair description. And I think that, and so there was, that hit Delaware, and there were protests here in Delaware, here in Wilmington, in Camden and Dover. And our current AG, they called them the Camden 22. Basically, there were 22 people that were arrested in Kent County for protest for violence associated with protests, whether it was, I don't know the exact charges, whether it was vandalism or what it was, but the police agencies at the time and the Attorney General, the Deputy Attorney General, basically charged these people, and our AG dropped the charges.
Okay.
Her decision. Why this is relevant is the police departments then basically put out a no confidence letter that said, you're undermining, what we're doing. And so, I remember when this happened, I'm running for governor, and I was like, well, that's really kind of interesting. That, when you have a disconnect between who is supposed to be, quote unquote, the top cop, the Attorney General, and the police agencies, that's going to cause a problem.
And I agree with you for that word disconnect, right? I think it's a great word that you use to describe law enforcement during that time in regards to its citizens and its community.
Totally agree.
What I believe our Attorney General was attempting to do, and I can't speak, and I would love for her to come on the show to speak to her point as well as you're expressing your point, but I think that her, similar to what other politicians were feeling, not only in Delaware, but all over the United States, was trying to build a connection between their citizens and law enforcement. And they're still trying to do that to this day.
Agreed.
Our local police chief here in Wilmington has just been given a vote of no confidence by our city council. So we're still dealing with the issues, not as in full force as we were back then in July of 2020, but still to this day. So to her benefit, I think it was trying to build a connection. And again, this is Kerwin's interpretation of that, the agenda's interpretation of that. And from what I read is that you follow more of a law and order policy, and a representative for law and order, which you should, of course, as the Attorney General. But our former president made it very clear that he ran on a law and order platform. So does your ideas mimic his?
Not necessarily. And so I want to explain, because I think, and this is something that people have asked, well, if you're law and order, that means that you are, 100% pro-cop.
Well, it's hard to, I would say, deny it as being a Republican and then running as a law and order person on the Republican Party in 2022, we're in now, and not be associated and not have those same ideals as our former president did.
That's what makes this so important.
Great.
Because I think that there is a distinction, and so I think that what happens here, and this is, so to say law enforcement is always right and everything they do is above board and perfect is naive and incorrect. Okay? So I think that we have to build that connection, okay, is holding law enforcement accountable for what they're doing, okay, in terms of, one of my phrases is, I'm going to back a cop that lawfully discharges their duty. The magic word there is lawfully. Okay?
I thought it was discharge.
No, no. So lawfully is the key word there,
right.
And so I actually remember being asked this question, and I said, look, if you have a cop, in any profession, you have bad apples. Okay?
Absolutely.
If you have a bad apple who is a cop, that is, or law enforcement, so to be a little broader, because there are other agencies that are not necessarily police officers, right. That's an even bigger breach of the trust from my standpoint.
But from law enforcement, and I love this bad apple example, okay. Some professions can't have bad apples. Pilots can't have bad apples. If you work for Delta and there's a pilot that's a bad apple, that shuts down the entire airline.
You are correct.
And it gives me no confidence as a passenger.
Yep.
Okay? When I'm paying my tax dollars, and as a business owner paying business taxes and so on and so forth, to have law enforcement protect me and my family, my business, and my friends and what have you, I cannot afford as a citizen to have a bad apple. So as the Attorney General, this is what you would be dealing with on a daily basis.
Absolutely.
So for me, I do not live in the city of Wilmington, but I conduct business in the city of Wilmington. I have a police chief that has been given a vote of no confidence from city council. I have minor changes to law enforcement across the board out of our 100 and some agencies that are here in the state of Delaware, out of our 3 counties. So as a citizen of the state of Delaware, my confidence level is extremely low. in regards to law enforcement, as well as possibly the prosecution of law enforcement or the enforcement
Okay.
at the executive level, right? So what would you tell me as a citizen right now, as you said in this forum, to regain that confidence more so than what our current Attorney General has given us?
Before I answer that, I actually need a point of clarification.
Please.
When you say that you, as a citizen, do not have confidence in law enforcement, Delaware law enforcement,
Right.
why?
Well, I think that it has been proven time and time again that it is very hard for a person of color to be given an equal share of justice, right?
Okay.
Sometimes, I wouldn't say all the time, I don't think that that's fair at all, but sometimes our justice system doesn't lean in the direction of fairness when you're dealing with a person of color, right? We
Okay.
have several cases, not only in the United States, but within the state, where that hasn't always happened. More so, that has been brought to light since 2020. A lot of things have been investigated. Law enforcement has been investigated. And the other part about that is now there's cameras everywhere.
Sure.
So we're being able to be well informed as citizens. So that gives me proof to my statement. So having that being said, my feeling is that I don't have a tremendous amount of confidence. Although having friends in law enforcement, having family in law enforcement, I feel as they are my assets. If that were ever to happen, because the justice system as a whole, I don't feel as though I would be given a fair shake, right?
Okay.
So for me to conduct this interview and explain that to you to the contrary would be dishonest and unfair to either one of us, right?
Okay.
So that's why I feel that way.
Okay. So some of that is not Delaware specific, but I want to address it. Okay? And I think that what we need a change, because unfortunately for our current AG, law enforcement is not engaging with her. Okay? That they have the confidence and the conversation between the AG's office and law enforcement has not improved since that no confidence letter came out. So you've got dissent breeding here between the top cop and the law enforcement.
So the judicial branches of our state and the administrators of the judicial branch of our state, i.e. law enforcement, which has been clear and the News Journal has reported on it several times, is that there's a break there in some of our unions.
Agreed.
In regards to how, not necessarily all the officers, but
Right.
the organizations that represent them for our viewers at home,
Right.
the unions of those people, of those agencies have said, we're not thrilled with the actions of our Attorney General.
Correct.
Okay.
But that's only part of the problem. So I want to, the other side, and what you're talking about in terms of the justice system, and and people of color, versus white versus black, and how that is treated within the justice system. I can tell you firsthand, and when I was going through my biography, and I said, look, I did criminal defense for 5 years. Okay. How unusual it is to be running for, to have somebody that is running to be the top cop, the top prosecutor, who has been on the criminal defense side of things. I've seen it, and I absolutely agree that things are not always equal. It's, I can tell you, from my own experience in terms of representing clients, whether they were a white client or a black client or something like that.
Economic disparities.
Absolutely. And so, so one of the things that, so when we start talking about typical Republican things, I was very, very in favor of bail reform. Okay, because the reality in Delaware, and so about 2 years ago, huge bail reform here in Delaware that shifted the presumption from secured bail to an unsecured bail. Okay, and the reason for that was it was over 40% of our prison population in Delaware was pre-trial. Okay, there are so many people in Delaware who have no idea that there are people that are locked up pre-trial who have not had their day in court, okay? And I have a huge constitutional problem with that. We have people right now in Delaware that, because of COVID, COVID's been going on 2 years now, that have been locked up because they couldn't post bail, okay? For 2 years, who have yet to have their trial, okay? that, when we start talking about typical Republican versus Democrat, I'm on the Republican side going, there's a problem with this. We need to be, there is something called speedy trial. I don't think you can toll that. I think it's happening. I mean, it has been told. And what I mean by told is stayed. Basically the court systems, lots of states, including Delaware, said, hey, that whole speedy trial thing, COVID trumps it. And, and I disagree with that philosophically. So because I've seen, I've represented defendants, I've stood in a courtroom and I've argued to a jury and I've argued to a judge about bail or about sentence modifications or things like that, I have different insight into where some of the problems are, okay? And I think that that's really significant, and actually gives me a different level of credibility.
As soon as I got here, I just felt the warm embrace of the community, man. Like, what y'all got going on is wonderful. And no wonder y'all called the work group, because y'all putting that work in. For real, seriously, y'all getting the work done.
We are committed to creating the best Riverside we can with the community, for the community.
Let DART do the driving. DART First State provides transportation that is clean, safe, reliable, and affordable. Plan your trip and get real-time bus information with the free DART Transit app. Scan your phone to pay your fare with the free DART Pass app. So what are you waiting for? Try transit today. Visit dartfirststate.com or call 1-800-652-DART.
So before the break, we were talking about bail reform, and I understand, and you were eloquently explaining what is going on here with bail reform. And reform, yes, needs to happen. Reform, yes, some has happened, but it is nowhere near completed.
Agreed.
Right? But to my question was, how does that make me feel better about the justice system here in Delaware? And I'm not talking about nationally. I'm talking about here in Delaware. Now, I understand bail reform is important, but just the initial, when I mean law enforcement, I mean the initial response that I have with a law enforcement officer that begins that whole sequence. Because let's be honest, whether or not I need bail has a couple different reasons. Correct me if I'm wrong legally. One, I have to have done it, right? So who's determining that would be a law enforcement officer that comes to my residence or place of incident and is determining whether or not there is enough evidence here that says that I am culpable, correct me if I'm wrong, for moving forward for him or her to move forward and prosecuting me or arresting, charging me in that crime. What is happening here, right? And I'm sure that you know, is that underlying first instance or encounter with law enforcement as they're making that determination that sets an end road for a course of events in my life, okay? And how this is going to go, and whether or not I will be charged, or whether or not deadly force can be used, or something as simple as moving to adjust a cell phone or a belt or something like that that could be interpreted poorly, not because necessarily of my actions, but because of race in this country, an interpretation of past experiences that him or her may have had that is causing them to react in such a way. That's what when I say justice reforms, it just isn't bail. I agree. I think it speaks to what a lot of our viewers may feel. It's so much more than that, but it really gets down to that first interaction. To your point, part two, with our current Attorney General, current law enforcement executives, okay? And their disagreement.
Yep.
So we have that. So if the top brass is not even agreeing with one another in regards to how things should go, where I'm expecting there to be at least an accord, what confidence do I have as a person of color in dealing with law enforcement at its beginning stages?